Welcome both of you to the Star-Tribune.
Thank you,
Take a chance
Jeremy.
to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit why you're running. Representative Loucks.
My name is Bunky Loucks. I've lived in Casper all my life. I also have lived in my district all my life. Grew up on the west side. Proud to represent Mills Mountain View, western side of Casper. I own a small business here in town. I sell office products and office furnishings. Been doing that for 37 years. You guys are familiar with me. I've been around a little bit. I've served in public office for a good share of my life, starting back in got first elected to city council in 87, 88. And just continue to, we all give back in some way, whether it's politically or, volunteering at the YMCA or coaching a baseball team. So anyway, that's all I got.
Yes, I'm Laurie Longtine, and I'm running for House District 59, same district as Bunky. I, like Bunky, come from a long line of Wyoming people. My great-grandparents homesteaded. My grandparents on the other side homesteaded out in Bates Hole. I'm living in the house that my grandparents built, and all of us have lived there. Long line of NCHS graduates, went to what used to be Fort Casper School, and I'm a UW graduate from the UWCC Center up here. My daughter, my nephews, cousins, brother, sister, all graduated from NC. I have worked in various industries. I've left for school and work, but I've always come back. Worked in the oil field during the boom back in the late 70s, early 80s. Had to figure out something else to do when the bottom fell out of that one. Have been a small business accountant for many, many, many years, and also own a small business here in town. And I think I have a pretty good understanding and sympathy with people who actually have to work for a living, having been one of them and having to hire and fire them. So I think maybe some sense of the reason that I'm running, what's motivated me here is common sense and compromise seem to be scarce commodities lately. And I think a little bit more of that needs to be brought back.
So the first question I have, and I'd like you to expand on this, is a specific reason or issue. And you're talking about common sense, but was there a specific policy issue that you looked at and said, I need to run to affect this?
And highly motivating issue for me in this year is that as an accountant, I like numbers that add up and make sense. And the Medicaid expansion and our legislature's action on the Medicaid expansion didn't add up and didn't make sense. We could have been money ahead. I believe the number is that we're losing about $300,000 a day in Medicaid money. It's hurting our hospitals, it's hurting our doctors, and it's hurting our working poor. And not only our working poor, but just the average working person who pays taxes. Because if we don't take the Medicaid dollars, guess who gets to pick up all of those unfunded medical costs? We do. So yes, that would probably be my primary hot button issue, would be the Medicaid expansion.
Bunky, my question for you is, public office isn't a treadmill. There's a reason that you want to run again. Why do you want to run again?
It's because I've been encouraged for years to represent the people that I grew up around with and have done business with. I was in the, years ago I was in the city council. I took quite a break from elected office in order to, I have 6 children, and it was easy when they were little, and as they got older in sports and cars and stuff, and I sort of took a back seat. I was encouraged in 2010 by several Republicans and people to run, and I've always had good support from people in the community. I'm accessible to them. I have people that walk into my office, every day that, want to sit down and talk about whatever their issue is, whether it's Medicaid expansion or whatever the issue is. I listen a lot. There's plenty of people that we differ, but that's the great part of the process. It's good to have different people in office.
So next question for you, describe a vote you've made that you would redo, that you'd do differently if you got the chance.
I can't come up with anything. I want to say, I guess I'd have to put my thinking cap on. I can't think of anything right now. I'm pretty solid in my votes this last session. The budget session was pretty fast and furious. I can think of something. I know there is a few of them in past legislatures I wish I could take back.
Sure.
A lot of that comes down to, as you guys all know, when you vote on things, say on the House floor, as I do, it goes to the Senate, and then it might go to a conference committee, and quite honestly, sometimes you might have voted for something you really don't, that didn't end up the way you thought it did, or when you started to vote on it. So things changed very rapidly in the last week of sessions.
Okay. Ms. Longtine, what time commitment do you think a seat on the legislature requires, and do you have that kind of time?
It requires a tremendous amount of commitment. A lot of people, I think, make the faulty assumption that you're only there for 20 days or 40 days, depending on whether it's a budget or a full session. But when you start getting into caucuses and committee assignments and all of that, the citizen legislature puts in a lot of time, and it requires quite a commitment. That was always a factor that caused me to hesitate in running. And to be honest with you, it will be a challenge. But I've already asked people to step up and fill in all the slots where I might need to have something, because as a small business owner, I kind of need to be there a lot of the time. So I've talked to people about that. I have a few animals that I have to feed, a little bit of livestock. I've got somebody lined up who can take care of that for me. So because it takes such a commitment, you're traveling. I mean, I've already got an invitation to go to something in Laramie next month. Because of the travel and the time commitment, you need to have things lined out to cover your responsibilities so that you can fulfill the expectations of the job, so you can be present for the votes, so you can show up in the committees, and so you can take the time to educate yourself on the issues.
May I follow on that?
Yeah.
I mean, just to add a little bit to what she said. Yeah, it's quite a time commitment. The neat thing about our legislature and the citizen legislature, which I mean, is great. The last thing I want to see is have us become full-time politicians and get paid in Cheyenne. We're all different, and I mean, I've got to commend the people that, I mean, there's people down there that's their full-time job. I mean, that's really all they do. A lot of them are retired, or they have ranches or take care of themselves. But that's the beauty of it. I mean, the people that sit on appropriations, for example, I could never commit to that. There's no way. I mean, you guys know the number of days they spend down there. I mean, last year they started in like the 1st of September, and they were down there for a week every month, and then 2 weeks the last couple of months. And so everybody's different. I keep harping on that, and it's we all give the best we can. We all live up to our committee commitments, and it flows very well. So.
Ms. Longtine, this next question is for you, and I'll ask both of you and just kind of cycle back through. Let's talk about road funding. Legislators hiked the gas tax to increase funding for roads, but the boost is only a small Band-Aid on a large important problem. What would you propose for highway funding?
That one is a really tough one, because in Wyoming we have a demographic challenge. We only have a little over 500,000 people spread out over many, many miles. I'm not sure of this, but I believe we have more roads per capita than any other state in the Union. So it costs us a lot per capita to keep those roads going. Our roads help us with our commerce, they help us with our tourism, and they just make it easier for all of us to get around. And our roads we've always been very proud of. I honestly don't have a quick and easy answer for that. The 10 cent a gallon hike brought us up to parity with our neighbors on how much our gas tax was. But the majority of our dollars actually come from the feds. And a lot of our roads are maintained by federal dollars. So I'm not sure that Wyoming on its own can come up with a funding solution that would fully fund our road responsibilities, to be honest with you.
everybody knows one of the number one topics besides the Medicaid issue. We have adequate funds to take care of our roads, I believe. I was not in favor of the gas tax. I don't. I believe that there's other ways that we can fund the roads from within. We have. I think the main thing I hear from the people on the streets is they want to see our roads that we have maintained, and I am on the transportation committee, and I believe that we have the money to do that. I want to see us not building more roads. We put a whole lot of money into areas in the Wyoming Transportation Department that is not maintaining the roads that we have. I mean, if you notice that we seem to, and a lot of it's federal funding that's coming in, but it's about safety with more wide roads and turnouts for trucks and all the electronic signs we're putting up and stuff, and I'd really like to see us put a majority of our money to maintaining what we have, not growing more road infrastructure in order to have to maintain that also.
Let's talk about education. What would you as a legislator do to improve education in Wyoming? And obviously it's a broad question and it's been a hot topic, but what would you propose going to the next session to do?
Well, I did sit on the education committee for a couple years, and basically all we did during that time period was work on SF 104 and also the accountability issue. I'm sort of a negative guy on the accountability thing, talking to young people that have been in my home that are all teachers now. I think there's great teachers coming up. I have 2 teachers in my family. I mean, I think the total thing is parents, to be honest with you. I mean, I've had a lot of young teachers say, well, one was my daughter who teaches in a district in Colorado that she was teaching English Lit to non-English speaking high school students. You know, they really didn't have much interest in it, but she said, how am I going to be accountable? You know, I'm lucky to have everybody come to class every day. I got, 37 kids in the classroom. I mean, I think it comes down to teachers. We put all this on our teachers. Excuse me. It comes down to the parents. You know, we have kids that are coming into the schools that I paint this scenario with your average kindergarten class, and it came to me through a young couple that I know here in town. They're professionals in nurturing their children, and they said, yeah, we took our kid to school the first day, and he could read and write. And he knew his ABCs and colors and shapes and triangles. And then you have 4 kids in class that are like that. You have 6 more kids in the class that they can't read and write, but they know how to write their name, they know their ABCs and some colors. Then you have 6 other kids on the other end that basically know their name, Parents have a duty to nurture children to where they can, have, you hear the ads on the radios right now, that, here's what you can do with your kids during family time, teach them these things. I just think we put so much emphasis for the teachers to do this, to take care of our kids from, as Jack Kelly used to say, cradle to grave, is where we're going. But, a lot of the education that I see, the issue comes down to parents nurturing their kids and preparing them for that so they're not behind. You have a teacher that's trying to teach to 4 different levels in kindergarten or first grade, and it's really tough on them, I think. So. I mean, and one more thing, I don't know if you wanted to tie in funding to that. I mean, we fund our schools wonderfully, and I just, some people, there's a big movement going right now with this band of districts for, they feel they haven't been compensated, right? And I mean, the more money we throw at it, it's not going to help. It really needs to be things that happen when the kids are little in the home. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Education has always been a very important value in my family. I come from a long line of teachers. My grandfather, on my father's side, who happened to serve in the legislature, was a teacher here at NCHS. My grandmother was a teacher for a while at NCHS. My other grandmother taught in a one-room schoolhouse outside KC. My mother was a school teacher. My father taught. So yes, education is a very important value. Education is really the only reliable means you can give people to lift themselves up. Now, having said how important education is, the legislature itself doesn't have that much control over education. We have control over funding, but we have absolutely no input on curriculum, and we really don't have any methodology for influencing whether or not parents are sending their kids to school ready to learn. As far as parents go, parents today have a lot bigger burden than they did when I was in school. When I went to school, we all walked to our neighborhood school for the most part. Most moms stayed home. We walked home for lunch if we lived close enough. Now, most families, both parents have to work just to try and get the ends to kind of wave at each other before the end of the month, much less meet. So, honestly, yes, it is a parental responsibility, but a lot of parents are really stretched and they're having a hard time. So, it would be easy to say that the problem could be solved by making it the parents. It would be easy to say just get out of the way and let teachers teach, which is what I tend to say when I get kind of grumpy. But I don't think it is that simple a solution. It is a complex problem. Our schools are a reflection, in a way, of our society at large. And if you have poverty, if you have a lower reading level in your population in general, you're going to see it in the kids who are coming to school. So there is no easy answer. Having said that, SF 104, really bad idea. I think that was pretty clear to most people from the outset that trying to contravene the will of the people legislatively was probably not the smartest move. That does not mean that I was a big supporter of that particular superintendent, but she is the elected superintendent of public instruction under the Constitution. So other means should have been followed if we felt it was really that serious. I believe impeachment was one of the issues discussed. Other hot button issues that are running around the state right now: Common Core, next generation science standards. Simple soundbite: Common Core is common sense. Standards? Don't we want to hold our children to high standards? Don't we want to shoot high? Or do we want to dumb stuff down and then ensure that our kids cannot compete in a global economy? I would challenge anyone who has a problem with Common Core to actually go and look at the Common Core standards. It was not a program designed federally. It was a program that was a product of the National Governors Association, among others. As a matter of fact, the initial impetus for this started with the National Governors Association, the majority of whom are Republican. And it was so that when kids move across state lines, they don't have to scramble to catch up or wait for everybody else to catch up with them. We're all teaching to kind of the same goals. I do not think it is unreasonable to say, and as an employer, I really don't think it's unreasonable to say that a high school graduate should be able to do certain things, like count back change and figure 5% in their head. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. To be able to spell and form a complete sentence, I think that's not an unreasonable thing. And that's the direction of Common Core. Next generation science standards, we're trying to recruit Microsoft and all these high tech. Who are they going to employ in our state if we don't have high standards for science? If we don't follow the scientific method? These things are just good common sense.
Let me ask about game and fish funding. It's certainly an ongoing problem. The department's stuck between rising costs and capped fees. What would you propose as a solution for the department's funding woes?
I think that the move to fund the health care premiums out of the general fund for the game and fish was a very good move. We live here in Wyoming. First of all, I should preface this by saying the game and fish are my next door neighbors where I live, so I'm very fond of them because they're pretty good neighbors. And, I've had a conservation stamp, and I've hunted and I've butchered and all of that good stuff. I think that is a very, very important resource to the state. Hunting and fishing bring a lot of dollars to our state. They also ensure a really nice lifestyle. Here in Wyoming, we frequently forget that we can just go out our door and go. We have incredible access to land and the game and fish thereon. You know, there are people in other parts of the country that would kill for the kind of opportunities we have here. Yes.
Good one. Good one.
So we need to appreciate that, and we need to fund it properly. The rationale for trying to keep the game and fish funding, one of the rationales for trying to keep the game and fish funding out of the general fund was to keep it from being political. But the Game and Fish Commission is an appointed board that is political. So I don't think that argument holds a lot of water. A lot of different proposals have been floated. A lot of the jobs that the Game and Fish does now, and a lot of the programs they do now, are not targeted specifically toward game animals. You know, we used to have a great Game and Fish Expo up here, and it was one of my favorite events. And it fell to the axe because of funding. There's a Bolton Creek restoration project going on out southwest of town. They're doing a fantastic job collaborating with local ranchers. That could fall prey to the funding program also, and yet it is a very important program for all of us. So one of the less popular proposals, but one of the possibles, would be a user's fee for those of us who enjoy it but don't necessarily buy a license every year, that don't necessarily go out and get our elk or fish. But we are enjoying a lot of the programs and the results of those programs. So perhaps a user's fee.
Oh, game and fish.
Some good points there. We mentioned why the game and fish is autonomous, okay? Because we didn't want, I've read all the stuff, some of it's way long historical about keeping politics out of it. It is politically. So, I mean, one issue is, you know, does Wyoming Game and Fish stand alone, or is it going to be overseen? I mean, that's, you know, we're funding things we've never funded for them. They always were provided their own funding with license fees. There's been mandates put on them through, you know, the grizzly bear and the wolf stuff that the legislature has funded them this last budget cycle. I think one of the problems with the game and fish is they need to spend more time working on maintaining our healthy populations of animals and less time on other things. We have the, I'll use one for example, the poaching program. They spend a whole lot of money on all the resources for that. And if you look at the figures, most of all the poachers that are caught are turned in by people that are in the field when they see it. We are lucky, Ms. Longtine, we are so lucky in our state in that we have so much public lands is the bottom line on it. I mean, I have a friend that lives in Texas now, and I couldn't quite understand why he didn't hunt anymore. And he said, well, I can't afford to. There's no private land in the state of Texas, so there are a couple little pieces. It's all, I mean, excuse me, no public land. Sorry, how the word. We're very blessed with that. As far as the monetary thing, I did vote against the increase on the licenses. I believe this might be a little bit controversial, hugely controversial, but there's other ways. I mean, they have a huge number of licenses that go to their commissioners that are the ones that are gifted to, you know, all your foundations, okay? I really would like for us to look at the idea of taking those licenses back and using that as a lottery. And not a lottery, I'm talking about a lottery on a big scale that's done by somebody that knows what they're doing to bring in huge people on the internet, basically. And I believe there could be a ton of money raiser. Instead of giving those licenses, the governor's license, the commission license that go to specific special interest groups, you know, whether it be the Elk Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, but then they get to sell them as revenue for their programs. to a very limited audience, being their members, whether it be 100 or 200 or 400, to open that up to where those licenses, I believe there could be a lot of money raised. They had the program this year with the big game raffle. What was it called? I can't think of the name of it right now. But I just think that can be a huge thing as far as a revenue increase for the Game and Fish. And the big issue is the Game and Fish going to run autonomous still, or is the state, as we become more responsible for their budget, more money goes in their budget. Now we got their employees, and their employees need the benefit package, but it just isn't supporting itself with license fees anymore. Is the bottom line.
So that's a question I have for you, and I guess I want to give you a chance to make a closing statement, but I'd like you to frame it this way: is why should we choose you over your candidate or over your opponent?
Well, I hate to. I do not know Laurie at all, so I hate to say why I'm better than her, because I don't know that much about her. I mean, the bottom line is I've done a great job of representing my constituents in my area. I've lived here all my life, just as she has. I have been able to stay in touch and have my door open with people. The number of emails that you get from people, and when they're comfortable with you and they know that they can walk into your office and talk to you about stuff, I mean, I have a lot of contact with a lot of people, and I'm able to hear views from different walks of life. A lot of the kids I grew up with still live in Mills Mountain View area. It seems like they still live in the homes that they grew up in, and most of them, a lot of them are Democrats, but they know that that I'm accessible to them, and my door is always open. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, Bunky and I both have the bottom base qualification. We're from Wyoming. We're from Casper. We're from this neighborhood. We've lived here a long time. Yeah, I still know a lot of kids I went to school with and their folks. I was over at the Mills Senior Center the other day having lunch and visiting with, people's parents about, where's so-and-so and what's so-and-so doing and all of that kind of stuff, and showing pictures of kids and grandkids and dogs and all the usual stuff you do. I think that's a fairly low bar, to be honest with you. And it's not always a representative bar, because sometimes we do need a perspective that's not always from Wyoming and just Wyoming. What can I bring? Well, I am political and well educated on the issues. I'm smart, committed, and caring. I have been in a lot of people's shoes, so I understand where they come from. And I talk to a lot of people and like to listen to a lot of people and find out what's going on with them. I've volunteered as an FNEP volunteer, been with the JCs, done stuff with the Arc of Wyoming, sat on their state board, female accountants, various and sundry organizations, distributed stuff for Salvation Army, been a Santa. So you get to see and touch bases with a lot of people, and I think it gives you a good perspective that sometimes is lost by some of the people who are going to Cheyenne to represent us. So I can listen, I can act, I can compromise, and I'm pretty smart. I think that's a fairly good combination in someone that you want to send to Cheyenne to get things done on your behalf. And as a Democrat, I've learned to work with Republicans my whole life.
Well, thank you so much for
Yes,
we all
thanks.
work together.
and thank you, Bunky, as well, for coming in.
That's
Taking
it?
the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thanks. That was short, sweet, and to the point.
Yeah, no.